Meeting to order. Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just ran upstairs.
Okay, first we need to approve the agenda.
I would move to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Then we need to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any corrections or comments? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried. Is there anyone who wishes to make a comment, public comment at this point? Okay.
I would.
Oh, well, you'll make several anyway.
Yeah. I just want to make, I shared this, I think, with a couple, but I think it's uplifting, so I'll start the morning with it. I was at a birthday celebration for a 100-year-old gentleman on Saturday, and his wife's 95, and it was at Corky's in La Crescent, and I said to the wife, the 95-year-old wife, I said, well, I just scheduled my 100th for here too. They're putting it in the book now. She said, oh, well, how long will that be? I said, about 27 years, and she said, I'll be there. So that's the spirit you got to have. So anyway.
Unbelievable. Okay. And Brian, you are here. How about that? This is the closest to 9 o'clock we've ever come on an appointment, I think.
Yeah, we'll try to make this quick. So I have one item for the agenda today, and that's to recommending approving the 2018 prioritized bridge replacement resolution. So every year, right about in October, I try to come in with an updated list of what we plan on replacing over the next 5 years for the 5-year plan. This list gets used not only for ourselves on our planning purposes, but also we give it on to MnDOT Bridge Office, and the Bridge Office can put onto their program so they know what's coming down the line for work that they're going to need to do for looking at funding for inspections or for oversight of the plans as it gets developed. So for the first 4 years is pretty much the same items that have been on there previously. The 5th year is new bridges that we added. So we have a couple bridges that were added on a township road, Whipkey Hill Road. These bridges, we've talked to the state before about them. This was on these two bridges were on the list years ago. They kind of got removed, and I'm hoping to put them back on the list, get them replaced. And then the other 3 are all county bridges that are metal culverts getting in poor condition that just need to be replaced. So,
Brian, is the township portion 20,000 for each one?
It's 10,000 of
Or
the bridge. Yeah, so it's 10,000 of the toward the replacement, 10,000 worth of design plus the cost of the right of way or fencing. So essentially it's 20,000 plus. There's a few bridges that were on. I think there might still be one more bridge on here that was in the program back in 2008. At that point, the county paid for 10,000 of the township's 20,000 portion. So there might still be one bridge that has 10,000 for the township, but the rest of them are all 20,000 plus. Right.
And so then the townships kind of budget at their annual meeting for this 20,000 that they might need.
Yes.
Okay. Does the county pick up any of it? No. Does design work or anything like that, or is that all billed to the township?
So like on the design on the engineering side, so my time, essentially the county's picking up my portion of the oversight and the design.
Okay.
That doesn't get billed back. any of our staff time or consultant time that goes toward the design of the project or inspection of the project, we township would have 10,000 of that portion. The remainder of it, we can get reimbursed from the township bridge program costs through the town bridge aid. So then, even though the county's spending resources on that, we're getting reimbursed through that pot of funding. So really, the county cost really is my time and my effort.
Okay. So, and the townships know about this plan, so they can plan for it?
I have not talked to them about Whipkey Hill, and I probably should have before I came here today. Being
they
that
will.
being that it's 5 years out, we haven't spent any money on it yet. I do have a conversation I need to have with the state about this as well.
This is just a rough bridge prioritizing. I mean, if it comes or goes, it'll get shuffled around. It's not a big deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, before we spend any money on any of
Right.
these projects, the township will be talked to. They will all agree. Most of these projects, the townships have been talked to about them. Actually, I believe everything except for Whipkey Hill they have. The years move, so we can move a project up a year, up a couple years, back a couple years, depending on what we have for available resources. You know, if we have time, if we have money. If townships say yes, they have it in their budget to do it now, we can move it forward if possible. If we don't have enough funding, we can move back a year or two. That doesn't really create any major impacts either.
So you just need us to motion to approve the 2018. Motion to approve the 2018 prioritized bridge replacement.
I'll second it.
Brian, what's the criteria on these replacements?
So there's condition of the bridge. It needs to be eligible for funding for state money or for our normal town bridge funds. It needs to be a structure that has 10 foot or longer in length over the center line that's classified as a bridge in Minnesota. Federal funding, there's a 20-foot minimum length. And then condition, we inspect the bridges on an ongoing basis. When the sufficiency rating drops below 80, it's eligible for rehab. When it's under 50, it's eligible for replacement. Never mind. That's for the federal funding sources. For the state funding sources, when it's under 80 on the sufficiency rating, then we're eligible for rehab or replacement using our town bridge accounts. So it's that length, the size of the bridge, and then the condition. And then we can go after the funding source. So if it's in too good of a shape, we can't replace it. There's criteria as far as, the design too, as far as, how much traffic volume is, what type of roadway, as far as what we design it to. But it's all very well spelled out as far as when it's eligible. We have, I believe, currently 19 bridges that are eligible for replacement in this county. It has really gone down in numbers. When I got here, it was about 60. So it's been going down. We're doing a good job getting them replaced. There's a few more bridges that don't show up on here that are eligible or that we feel will be eligible within 5 years. But for the most part, most bridges that are eligible are on this list.
Yeah.
How many bridges
Okay.
do we have in the county?
About 180. And the reason why I say about is that, there's some bridges that, we might have a new bridge that we thought was on a private roadway or a driveway that we find out is in the right of way that becomes public, or there might be a public bridge that gets closed. So it varies between 179 and 181 in that ballpark. So,
Bridges in this county.
yep.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. John?
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
I have a couple of things to bring before you today. both related to crisis response in Houston County and actually crisis response in the greater 10-county region of southeast Minnesota. So first, a little bit of history. Houston County is part of a 10-county southeast region that collaborates quite well around adult mental health issues. That you guys have probably heard us talk about for some time, and is related to the CREST initiative, and it's been a very effective tool for the region and for us locally. Coming out of that several years ago was an effort to do a better job of crisis response. We, as well as other counties, were seeing increased numbers of people showing up with mental health crisis in emergency rooms and ending up in jails and things like that. And so the idea was to have qualified mental health professionals be able to respond to those crises on a mobile basis. That led to this crisis response grant that was written by the region, and it included two main things: a mobile crisis team that actually will go out on site if necessary, but also a call center. That's been very successful. We have, in the last couple of years that I've been here, we've promoted the use of it, talking with particularly law enforcement officers, and we've seen increased utilization in our county as well as across the region. The region then sent in another grant proposal, and since we had seen some growth in this, significant growth, we asked for additional resources. Unfortunately, the dollars available for that were spread across a larger part of the state, and instead of seeing an increase in funding, the region saw a decrease. And that put us in a position as to, so what are we going to do as far as crisis response? It was something we've been kicking around with the directors, human services directors in the region for the last year or so. Fortunately, at the end of last year, there were unspent dollars in this statewide grant that was able to kind of carry us through, and we've been waiting to see what the response to our next grant would be. But we kind of figured there's going to need to be some sort of county participation in this to be able to sustain the level that we've developed. We recently saw the results of that grant, and again, it's a reduction, and so we have to kind of make some decisions as to where we're going to go with that mobile crisis response. We have talked pretty extensively about 3 different options, and those options have changed over time. Initially, it was one that was an option, the highest dollar amount was to continue expansion of mobile crisis. The second one was kind of a status quo, and the third was kind of a cut option. After we got this recent grant back from the state, all 3 options that are before us would require some cutting. So we've had some discussions about that, and part of what I'm here to talk about is what the county's support is, or whether you will support on a financial basis sustaining that mobile crisis in addition to the grant dollars. This is stuff that I spent some time discussing with Jeff last week, and I sent you some information, some talking points. It's also connected to a larger crisis response center proposal. If you recall, last year I came before you and mentioned that all the counties in the state had resolutions in front of them to determine whether they support bonding money in the legislature for regional crisis response centers. And all 87 counties, including Houston County, supported that resolution. Well, now that money is being let out through grants, and our region is wanting to position ourselves to be able to capture some of that, to have one of those regional crisis response centers in our region, likely in Rochester. The plan is, once that, assuming that grant is funded and there is a crisis response center in our region, this mobile crisis program would be integrated or consolidated with that. There's an economy of scale as far as some of the professionals needed, clinical supervision, billing, all of those things that would reduce the individual cost of mobile crisis if it's included in that overall crisis center proposal. So the second thing I'm here to ask about is whether or not the county would endorse a letter of support or a resolution of support for that proposal that the region is going to submit for those bonding dollars. Assuming the county supports that, or the counties in the region support that, our CREST initiative then will put together an MOU, which has then representation from all 10 counties. So it's kind of a two-part thing here. We've got an existing mobile crisis system that has been effective. Utilization has gone up, funding has gone down. That's a short-term thing, and a long-term opportunity as far as support and a resolution of support for a proposal to hopefully get one of these regional crisis centers in our region. So, any
John,
questions
yeah,
before I yammer on?
this grant that potentially would be applied for, is that a competitive grant or a block grant?
It's a competitive grant.
And basically, what are the odds? Do you have any feel for that?
I would say our odds are pretty good in that our region and Olmsted County specifically really took a leadership role in the bonding proposal and getting that passed at the legislature last year. Also, the chair of the committee that passes that bonding proposal is Senjum, who is from the Rochester area. So there's a lot of support for this in our region. Also, assuming we support financially the sustaining mobile crisis, we can use those dollars also as kind of match or skin in the game, if you will, for this larger bonding proposal for a crisis center. So kind of a long answer, but I think that number one, it is a competitive proposal. Number two, I don't think that they're going to put regional centers all in one region, so they will be across the state. But I think our region is positioned well, and assuming we support mobile crisis and can leverage those dollars for our proposal, that would further position us really well for those bonding dollars in our region.
Well, it sounds like we need a resolution to support the application for the grant for the bonding money. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor, aye? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried.
So then I assume that something like through Jeff or whatever, I could get something that item or gives us that resolution, and I'll give it to the folks who are putting together that memorandum of understanding. Okay. As it relates to the funding, our proportionate amount that that we've looked at personally, I would recommend either the first option, which is sustaining our current level of programming, or a second level, which is a slight cut. Right now, the region, it's all going to different boards, and whether there's support for option 2 or option 1, my recommendation is the difference between 2 and 1 is not that significant, but that we should probably follow the region, not pay more or less. For us, the amount based on a proportionate population is $43,235 over 2 years, or $21,618 for 1 year. This isn't something that I built into our 2019 budget. However, we do have a funding source through a different adult mental health initiative grant that is outside of this CREST initiative. Those are dollars that at the end of the year we typically struggle to fully spend. And this, I think, would be a better use of those dollars in supporting regional crisis response. So the figures that I just gave you are for the number 1 option. Do you want me to go over the number 2 option as well?
So basically, this would be covered without adding to your budget.
Correct. Yeah, I wouldn't add additional dollars to the bottom line of our budget. We have other grant dollars that would be allowable to be used for this expenditure. We would just need to spend them differently than we customarily have, or at least a portion of them.
Approximately how many dollars are involved in the difference between the plan, the option that you proposed and the lower cost option?
Option 2 is $36,534 for 2 years, and option 3 is $32,962. So I didn't do the math real quickly on that. Probably between 1 and 3, it's about $11,000 difference over 2 years. Also, this is money that we would need to spend our grant dollars first. And so this is money that would be spent last. And as we gain efficiencies, especially in the second year of this, assuming we are successful with this bonding proposal, perhaps we wouldn't need this. This would be a kind of a not to exceed figure.
I guess I just need to get this clarified. We added a forensic person in the jail, and then you have the crisis center. How do they work together? The crisis team is supposed to keep them from ever getting to the jail. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then how we're also involved with Hiawatha Valley mental health. I mean, and then we just had a presentation for a veterans court and so on. I'm just wondering, at what point do we, I mean, are we falling over one another here, or?
I wouldn't say we're falling all over each other, but I would say that I think it's important to have multiple tools in the box. I think the proportionate amount that we're looking at to have a regional response is a pretty good value. I think, you know, if you look at it from a health side, you need people who drive ambulances as well as doctors and paramedics, and you need nurses. There's different components of it. Our forensic social worker is part of that. The collaboration we're trying to do with law enforcement is part of that. Being able to look at different populations differently, like the Veterans Court, is part of that solution. Addressing addiction as creatively as we can, coexisting conditions where there's mental health and addiction. We need to be looking at a lot of different things and trying to do those in an economical way. But I don't think we should be developing things that are on parallel tracks. They need to be integrated. And that's one of the things that I think has been a real hallmark of this region, is there is a great deal of coordination of those efforts.
Okay. Could you give me an example of the crisis team? It's regional, so you have an event in La Crescent. How's the response coordinated? Who sets it off? Who?
Well, it's customarily done through law enforcement, and response time is pretty good. Our experience with law enforcement is they've really appreciated the crisis response that we've gotten. One of the reasons to try and sustain funding for this is it's really critical that it's a 24/7 response. If we can only support certain hours, then our concern would be that, you know, during the night or during a time when there isn't coverage, law enforcement would not have access to that, and therefore if it's not predictable, they're not going to use it.
So each county has, say, one person on that team, or I guess I'm
No,
not sure
it's,
how?
it's actually contracted through Zumbro Valley Mental Health Center, and they coordinate that. They coordinate the call-outs and the communication back and forth.
Okay, so they're really depending on the county for funding rather than personnel. Would that be a true?
I'm sorry, say that again.
So the Zumbro Valley group is more dependent on getting some funds from Houston County than they are personnel to intervene or respond.
Well, Zumbro is the vendor that provides the coordination of services, and so they staff that up, and the money that comes from the grant, as well as the money that would presumably come from county's support
Yeah,
of it,
that's right.
would support their efforts, their staffing.
Okay.
John,
And that contracting, by the way, is through Olmsted County, so on behalf of the region. So we don't have a specific contract that I'll bring to you. It'd be more through that CREST initiative.
are you familiar enough with this to be able to give us a typical scenario of what sets off a on-site crisis intervention and how it's implemented?
I think what you would customarily see is if somebody's having a mental health crisis, oftentimes law enforcement's called. Say a neighbor or somebody sees something that's happening or hears something, law enforcement officer shows up, and now they've got a choice to make. This person is having a crisis, but have they committed a crime? Are they safe to themselves or others? It's questionable, but they can see that it's a mental health type of crisis. Oftentimes people would then end up in an emergency room, or they would end up in jail. We want to see a reduction in those things because we think that
Yeah.
addressing it from a mental health perspective and de-escalating that and getting people the care they need is a better option for all concerned. So you want to see a reduction in the ER visits and things like that. Our utilization of this in Houston County has gone up over time. So last year we had 13 mobile calls to Houston County. This year we have 18 so far to date. So we're seeing an increase in that number. It's not a huge number of people, but they're very, very needy folks who would do much better with this type of response.
Now, what I think I'm hearing is that an officer goes out to a situation and determines this is a mental health problem rather than something that needs to go to jail, for lack
like
of a better term. Okay,
crime
then
has been committed.
what does that officer do? Who does he call, and how quick is the response time from that entity? And what does the officer do in the meantime? How does this actually work? Nuts and bolts.
Well, I know that there's a call. We've got all sorts of information that we've presented, and our partners with Mobile Crisis have presented at a number of different places. So there's a call that they call in, and perhaps it can be addressed over the phone through a call center type of thing, or they dispatch a group of people to come and do mobile crisis response. I don't know specifically, I don't have the data to say for our county it's approximately this amount of time. Obviously it's a pertinent question is if the further you are from where the service is being dispatched, is it feasible? I would have to conclude that it is because it's being used and its utilization is going up actually.
Yeah.
But I don't know
the details of it that I'm trying to sort out in my mind. I would logically ask the chief deputy rather than you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, if you're looking for examples of when it would be used, it might be anything from a suicide attempt or suicidal ideations through domestic issues and things where like John said, a crime hasn't necessarily occurred, but the cop and the sheriff are the first ones to get that call because people don't know who else to call.
Yeah.
And then they have the ability to, through dispatch, to call back to this crisis response center and either get some immediate guidance on what's the right approach to calming this person down or calming the situation down or calling in help in that area. Where an ambulance might not be the best response, but right now that's what's get called because that's what we have available.
Yeah. Okay.
Our feedback is that it's been very effective when used. Part of it is getting people to know about it. So over the beginning of this program, our utilization was actually quite low. And so we needed to promote that it's actually there. And then once they use it, it needs to be a positive experience. If the experience is negative for the law enforcement officer, where it's like, okay, that was absolutely no help, then they probably won't continue to use it. But what we've heard back, feedback, is that it has been effective, and it's another tool in the box for those folks who are out there in those kind of situations in real time. Jeff is exactly right. You know, the intention is that the person doesn't end up in the ER or also doesn't end up with some time in the jail, and that we funnel that person to the mental health services that would be adequate for that. Sometimes it's more of a mental health type of hold or something where somebody needs to go somewhere until they're stabilized. But it's services that are directed at that specific need as opposed to sorting it out in jail or in the ER. And again, it's one of a number of different tools that we're trying to put together across our region to be more effective in how we deal with folks who are experiencing mental health crisis.
And Brian, if you use, John, if you use the grant funding source that you've mentioned, will that take away from anything else that's being provided now?
We'll need to make some adjustments, but as I mentioned earlier, the grant funding, separate from the CREST initiative and separate from other grant dollars that support mobile crisis, but also adult mental health dollars, it's a separate thing that counties do individually. That grant source would be a legitimate use for this type of expenditure in supporting mobile crisis. Customarily, we have at the end of the year struggled to make sure that that grant is fully spent. We spend it on things that are important and necessary and beneficial, things like transportation vouchers and different things. But I think our resources would be better spent through that grant supporting a regional crisis response. That gives us a more robust response for those types of things on more of a regional basis. I guess part of this too is, you know, Houston County is part of a 10-county region, and I want to be able to say to them that we're playing our part and we're benefiting from this program. We benefited from the grant dollars that came to it and fully funded it in its beginnings, and now we have a program that has been successful and it's actually growing. Utilization is going up, funding's going down, and so we're kind of at a crossroads. What do we do with that? And that's why myself and others are in front of county boards in our region saying, okay, here's some options. And I'm encouraged that it isn't just, okay, write out a check. It's also looked at in coordination with our larger crisis response efforts for the bonding bill and a crisis center that would make this standalone service a whole lot more cost effective, kind of in an economy of scale.
When might you know on the other grant? Or
They're submitting that grant. That's actually the piece that has a real timeline to it. So the resolution that you just passed, that I need to get to our folks by the beginning of November so that they can complete that grant proposal. I'm not exactly sure when we hear. The timeline that they have in place is pretty aggressive, so I'm thinking the beginning of 19, and assuming you have bonding, they'd start building and developing. There'd also be a competition or a competitive bid for who the service provider would be. And there are dollars, significant dollars, coming from a variety of different sources for that crisis response center, from Mayo, Olmsted Medical, some of the managed care organizations. So there's a lot of resources behind it, and I think we'll have a very competitive proposal.
So are you looking for another motion?
Yeah,
here?
as it relates to the, I guess, temporary support of mobile crisis in this interim, and that those dollars can also be used as kind of a match or support for our overall crisis center proposal. And as I said, there's first, number 1 proposal, 2 and 3. My recommendation would be either 1 or whatever the count or the region goes with. If you pass 1 and the rest of the region or other parts of the region pass 2, it doesn't seem right that some do more and some do less. It's a proportional amount based on population.
So wording that,
Motion to allow temporary support of the mobile crisis response with grant dollars. Option 1, unless region as a whole goes with option 2.
Sounds good.
Up to the amount of 43.
Up to an amount of 43,235 over 2 years.
so moved. There, whatever Jeff said, I like that one.
Well put, Commissioner.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to be sure, we're not talking any levy dollars.
No.
You're comfortable with a grant,
Yep.
okay? All right.
The potential, of course, is always there, and that's why the questioning got a little close this morning, because the first question I asked, is it a competitive grant or a block grant, and you answered competitive. And so, well, to a board member, there's a red flag, because competitive grants do tend to go away after a while. And so that's why the questioning got a little close.
No, and
Because
those are excellent questions.
eventually, we being future boards, are probably going to be on the hook.
Well, my
you know,
guess is that
logically.
if the grant doesn't fund, or if over time that grant dollar goes away, hopefully there's other dollars that are found through third-party billing and a variety of other things. So we'll work hard to try and maintain that funding source, but
Yeah.
it's not out of the question that we would be again looking at a region and saying, is this continued or ongoing investment worth the value that you get out of it? Right now, we're able to support much of this through grant dollars,
Yeah.
and we'll continue to do that every way that we can, but, you know,
Yeah.
you can't
It-
guarantee that that's the way it will be.
It could happen, and
Right.
so you have to factor it in, and I think we've done that, so, yeah. We've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, approved claims, human services, and license center disbursements.
I'll make a motion to approve the claims.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. Approve abatement application for David Gluckelberger, I think. That's maybe close enough, from Brownsville Township.
If I could briefly, what happened here was this house is under construction, and there was an assumption made that the construction would have been completed by now, and so so it was changed in the system as complete. We were informed by the owner that it is not not completed yet, and so the house is still under construction, and so this backs it out to reflect that properly is where it comes from.
I would move to approve the abatement.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, consent agenda.
All right.
You have some personnel things to...
Yes, if you, all right.
I have a minor amendment to your consent agenda.
Yep.
That I made a typographical error under one of the bullets.
I've already corrected it on this copy, just pen and
I
inked
just
it.
sent it to you. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure it came
Yeah.
through.
Yeah, we, the case aid worker, which we'll be initiating the search on, we had written on here as under the B21 line, and it's actually B22. So
It's
just
actually, what did you say, Jeff?
B22.
Okay.
Yeah, so I corrected pen and ink on here, so. The actions on here are affirming the hire of Julie LaFour as the Assistant County Attorney. Looking forward to having her on board. The searching for the 2 Planning Commission seats, that will be effective date of appointment on the first of the year. And we'll use the standard practice to fill those. And then in Public Health, promotional reassignment of Deb Hartley to the probationary collections officer position. So one we're filling from retirement, and then initiating the search for her replacement then as a case aid worker, and then affirming the hire of Hannah El Effendi as the probationary child protection social worker, and condition on the background check for her then, and then initiating the search for our public health educator, a public health nurse, and then 2 changes of employment from probationary to regular status for Leah Mildy and Jean Young. And then finally in the recorder's office, affirming the hire of Stephanie Schellschmidt as our probationary deputy recorder.
Sue, are you going to introduce Julie?
I will.
All right.
Can I just come forward? This is Julie
Sure.
LaFour. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
We'll be our assistant county attorney to replace Jamie Howell.
Okay. And you're coming to us from where, Julie?
I actually am working in St. Paul right now. I'm originally from La Crosse. I've been practicing law for about 15 years now, a little over 15 years. And my parents are over in Houston, and I'm just looking to come home. So,
Well, good.
yeah.
Are you, I gotta say, I always think it's funny too, in the lawyer term, when you say I've been practicing for how many years, that term just seems odd to me.
You get it wrong
Well, like
once in a while.
doctors too, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I've been practicing medicine. I'm like, stop practicing already. But
Yeah.
anyway, just kind of.
Yeah, well, that's actually my joke is when I do get something wrong, it's like, well, we do call it practicing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
It's a learning process as we go.
And you said you were working in St. Paul, was it?
Yes, I have my own firm right now in St. Paul.
Okay.
Actually, roles available in the suburb of St. Paul. And so I would be closing that up.
Well, welcome home.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is a beautiful area, and I'm happy to be here. And I was joking before, my parents are actually up in Mount Prairie, so if you happen to see a house with a totem pole, that's my dad.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Am I
Thank you.
approved? Yes? Okay. Thank you. I look forward to working with you.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Max, we need the motion
No.
to do that.
We do. Have we had a motion or not? I don't remember.
I would move to approve
Okay.
the
Consent agenda.
consent agenda.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Discussion items. Since Teresa's had so much time since she's been back from Toronto to work on this, why we'll let her lead off.
Like Fred said, I've been in Toronto since last Thursday, so I did all my prep for the meeting this morning at 5 a.m. So no meetings, no county meetings, international meetings.
International. You're an international ambassador.
They
To
had a
Toronto?
major election in Toronto while I was there yesterday,
really?
so I'm waiting to hear how that came out.
Wow, cool. I had no meetings to report on.
I had a Wildcat Park meeting. I don't know, Jeff, do you want to review anything that went on there? Or I can just give a,
Go ahead, quick
Go
summary,
for it.
and we will be bringing the actions to the board next week for
Yeah,
for some of that.
the park is done for the year. Pretty routine year, I guess. We have some issues that we discussed that we'll report on, and some things that we're looking at going forward. And just in case I say something that might get it misinterpreted again, we're not closing Wildcat Park, okay? Didn't even come up, not even close.
But you know, now that you said that, people are going to say, what, Jackson or close?
Yeah. Get this right,
You
Craig.
can't win.
No, we do have some things, you know, as we've discussed before, and I won't go on and on about this, but we don't own the park. And therefore, we incur expenses that we don't necessarily have all the power to remedy, you know, because the Corps says, yeah, you can manage our park, but they're not pouring a lot of money into us managing it. So those dollar things, as everything we do, are important, and we need to make sure we're managing them correctly. Other than that, I remind people in the La Crescent area that there's a candidate forum tonight, 7 o'clock at
6 o'clock,
6 o'clock at the
Fine Arts Center.
Fine Arts Center at the high school. So if you're interested in attending.
And that's for all elected, or who?
Do
They
you
did
know?
that like it was like last time, I
It-
think?
Yeah, I think
it includes the
state
representatives.
representatives and, yeah.
Yes.
And,
City
That's
councilmen.
and
Tonight at 6?
and Teresa, yeah.
Yeah.
That's tonight at 6?
Tonight at 6.
I think there's also one in Caledonia for
District.
people running for county commissioner.
That's
Same
correct.
time.
I was going to talk about that in a moment.
Okay,
Did it on
and
the same night?
I want to add one thing to Jack's report. You know, it's actually the county park committee, and they also talked about Botcher Park.
oh yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, well,
I have to hear about it, you
well,
know.
Teresa's husband Dick, as some of you are.
He's working on it pretty diligently.
Yeah, he's been very, very diligent, and we had the gentleman who is head of the Boy Scout troop, who did a great job of putting trails in, and so we discussed some of those issues. Again, sometimes the legalities seem to muddy waters that wouldn't need to be muddied, but we have to be careful if they're down there that any liability is
Right.
is covered and so forth. And if they work all day, they'd like to camp overnight, but there was a little issue on whether they could camp overnight and so on. So all of that was
And I think
covered
that'll
at the
come
meeting.
up next week.
Yes.
Yes.
So, okay, thanks, Teresa. The only other thing I wanted to mention in La Crescent is that the La Crescent Event Center is rising. Really getting a lot done. It's looking very impressive at this point already. And secondly, there's a paved bike trail on Shore Acres
I
Road.
saw that.
Yeah, it's the, taking the wagon wheel and extending it to the West Channel Bridge. And
Beautiful.
should be very nice.
So now you'll be able to get all the way from Shore Acres down to basically the interstate bridge, is what you're saying?
Well, there's still the issue of the West Channel Bridge. If you come off the trail, you really need to pedal up a little bit of a grass slope get on
Yeah.
the sidewalk, go across the West Channel, and then away you go. But there's talk of, at some point, maybe going under the road. I've heard that.
Kind of like where the visitor center is? Are you talking?
No, where the launching,
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, how you can get underneath and then get around to the other side? Is
Yeah.
what you're talking about?
yeah.
Where the, because you come by where it launches, and then
Yeah.
you go around by where the visitor center is, and then you can get back up, right?
I'm not sure where you're meaning the visitors.
Or are you
center.
talking, when you say the West Channel Bridge,
I'm talking on the Pike.
on the Pike, okay, that
Yeah,
bridge?
yeah,
Okay,
that bridge.
okay. I was thinking you were talking going the other way.
No,
Okay.
no. So, but that'd be years in, if ever. Right now, this is a nice improvement, and I think it'll be well utilized. So, that's all I got.
Two things. The aforementioned candidate forum tonight in Caledonia is in the library, and people are going to be there at 5:30, and the people that come are asked to submit questions in writing, and then the moderators will take care of asking those questions. The debate will actually start around 6, I think was the phrase used in the paper. And it wasn't specific, but I think it'll be about that. The other thing is we had a finance committee meeting this morning, and the budget process is, of course, ongoing, as usual at this time of the year. The administrator has met with all of the department heads and gotten their information and done some back and forth, and that will continue to happen during November at a more or less increasing pace, I'm sure. And that's all I've got.
I just thought, Fred, I think I can do this under discussion item, and that's, I talked to Tess 2 weeks ago, the jail, the old jail. We can begin to look at possibilities of doing things in that building. So I think we need to kind of move that up a burner or two and get going on that.
Yep.
And Jeff's shaking his head, so. Okay,
Wrapping that into the ongoing projects I have that I await answers on, so.
okay, very good.
Just getting something written for my own benefit here.
High school.
Okay, closing public, oh, wait a minute. Jeff, do you have anything additional?
Nothing else to add.
Okay. Closing public comment. Okay. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
I would move to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. We are adjourned.